Right gamers, this is a video I've wanted to make for a while, and with the latest patch it just basically threw everything out of the old meta and introduced a new one. Now a new meta that has basically given the gamers the key to getting into the later depths.
Yeah. After all, why not? Why shouldn't I keep it?
Now we're not here to talk about the L2 slot build today. Today we're going to give you the best build for every Nightfarer in Nightreign, at least in my opinion. Now this is based on solo trios from depth 3 all the way up to depth 5. It's been a while since I played the base game, depth 1, depth 2, but these builds will still mostly be relevant for the deep of night. And for the sake of the video, none of these builds are going to be a balancer build, because let's be honest, the best build in the game right now is the balancer build. You know, slap on 2 balancer relics, slap on the Night Invader relic, add 3 physical attack plus 4s or holies, put Dormant Reapers on, there you go, you got the best build in the game for basically 90% of the characters. So, for the sake of the video, this is going to be character builds only, you know, builds that are specific to each character. Now, this is in no particular order, but we're going to start up with the Scholar. Now, the Scholar's a funny character. I've never really felt like he does much, and that's even when I've been playing him with depth 5. Obviously, you know, you can throw strong pots, you can do great status build up, but outside of that, is his damage going to be amazing? Not really, no. Is he ever going to be as, you know, much DPS as the Executor without an insane amount of buffs and a relic? No, he's not. But for the sake of the video, these are my best 2 builds for the Scholar. Now, I'm going to give you 2 builds because there is only ever really 2 builds I will run with him, and it really depends on the boss you're fighting. So first up, we have, I like to call it the DPS Scholar, but it's basically just Scholar with his Dex relic. Now, there are a few things that are a staple to every Scholar build that I use. One of those is items conferred to allies. The relic itself is self-explanatory, and if you've picked Scholar to be a DPS character on the team, and you've not got items to confer on, your teammates are probably going to be a little bit upset that you're not picking a stronger character, because that items to confer is really how you make up the DPS you lose when playing Scholar for other Nightfarers. And the other 2 effects that I will always have on is continuous damage inflicted on targets threaded by the ultimate ability. This is great for camps, and to go alongside that is defeating the enemies fills up the arc gauge. Again, both those are self-explanatory, and honestly, Scholar really shines early game. That's when you really want to utilize Scholar and all his abilities. His ultimate ability being able to clear out a camp very fast, his pots being able to stagger and stun lock a lot of early game bosses, like your Misbegottens and stuff like that. Scholar really shines early game. So, you know, you want to take the most of his abilities in doing that. Now, obviously, if you can, try and put defeating the enemies fills up the arc gauge, the base version on as well. I can only fit the +1 version on, which honestly is still fine for most camps. Now, obviously, the build is RNG dependent. Like my top first relic with the Bloodblade, that's a really good relic. But for most of the time, that's not going to last that long on my character. I'm going to be finding a different weapon. And as you can see on the right hand side, the deep relics, I have Dormant Powers helps discovers katanas, because katanas probably are the best weapons in the game. And with Scholar's Dex relic on, he gets an S scaling in dexterity. Katanas have an S scaling in dexterity, so you get to do quite a bit of damage with them. The rest of the build's pretty self-explanatory. It's just physical attack ups, and then on my bottom base relic, that's just to boost my allies' attack power. There are probably a better relics for that out there, I just don't have a very good one. That's the best one I've got, and it also has the slowing down the analyze speed. Now, the only other build I would ever really run for the Scholar, and you've probably guessed it, is a Pot Scholar. Even after the nerfs, Pot Scholar is extremely strong when it comes to using his pots, especially for like early game bosses that you can basically just stun lock and defeat just by throwing a few pots that, you know, they don't cost a lot of runes really. Now, yeah, granted, you know, giving 50 pots is now, that's a bit crap, but it's still enough to easily get you through the early game, even day 2 a lot of the times, and, you know, you're still probably pots left over for the end of the night bosses. I still don't think the pots, unless, you know, you're using a Scholar who has cheated relics and is doing insane damage, pots really aren't going to take out a full boss. It's only really you see that happening when the Scholars are using, like, you know, cheated relics. And people might not agree with that. Like, they're probably seeing some Scholars that have, you know, legit relics that take out bosses with just their pots. The chances are most Scholars you're going to find are using cheated relics, just like the Beastclaw Rev right now. With how poor the relic system is, I can see why people do it. I don't agree with it, but I can see why they do it. So yeah, let's be honest, if you've got a pot Scholar and he's taking out a boss just using pots, he's probably cheating his relics. Moving on, we have most people's favourite Nightfarer. He's literally the pick for 90% of people. We have the TheIroneye. Now, this build might be controversial, and honestly, I don't really like playing bows with TheIroneye. The build that I'm going to talk about is a katana build. Now, I have very good relics for this build, and they are very, I want to say complex. I mean, they're not complex, they're just, there's a few things on there that make the build a little bit stronger. It's complex for me because I have a small brain, so let's get into it. So there's a little bit of a pattern going here. The best weapon in the game, katanas, one of the highest dex characters in the game, TheIroneye, plus the mark, you basically have insane damage from katanas. Now, he only has 13 arcane on his base relics, but if you were to put on his arcane relic, he would have just as much arcane as the Executor. So you could obviously do that, but I don't. I think it's perfectly fine without it. And honestly, it is actually worth it. I think you lose like 6% damage on your bows, and you gain like, I think it's something like 25% stats build up. So it's definitely worth doing, but I don't because I can't fit it on. So the whole gist behind the build, as you can see there on my first relic, I have the weapon starts with poison. Now, you want to poison the enemy as fast as possible because that goes in tandem with the other relics that I have on. As you can see, we've got the Evergel and the Night Invader relic. On that first relic where I've got the Evergels, honestly, I would prefer to have the Night Invader there so I could take up another slot for something different. But unfortunately, you don't get to pick and choose what you want. So we've got the Night Invader and Evergels. Again, self-explanatory, you know how much damage they can give you. Bottom relic, we have 3+ katanas equipped. When you have 3+ katanas equipped, you get a 20% flat damage for all weapon types except bows. For bows, you get a 10% flat damage. And as you can see on the bottom of that relic, we also have attack power up when facing a poison afflicted enemy. Now, alongside the poison on his bow and on the deep relics where we have the character skill inflicts heavy poison damage, which can also poison the enemy, we also have the dormant powers discovers katanas, and with that, we have attack power up when facing a poison afflicted enemy. These will stack with each other. The base version gives you a 10% damage boost, and the plus one gives you a 16% damage boost. So if you put all those together, the physical attack plus 4s, the 3+ katanas equipped, the attack up when facing a poison afflicted enemy, any Night Invaders and Evergels that you also have on the build at that time, you can imagine you can do some crazy damage. And the good thing about this build is you could actually fit on the Balancer Relics if you really wanted to. You could make it work with the 3+ katanas and the attack up with poison and the physical attack up. Obviously, you would need God tier Relics rolls. Unfortunately, you don't get to pick what you're rolling, but you could actually make it work with the Balancer Relics. And you can probably imagine just how cracked that would be with something like the Rivers of Blood. As we are on the page of the weebs, we may as well finish up with everyone's favourite weeb, and that is the Executor, the Executor. Now, realistically, there are an infinite ways you can build this guy, but he already finds the best weapons in the game. He already has probably the most DPS outside of the spellcasters. So realistically, someone who is very good at something, you don't really want to change it. You just want to make it stronger. So it's pretty similar to the TheIroneye build I've already showed you. There are just a few differences that we put on the Executor. Now, top relic, we obviously have the red Balancer relic. Now, you can change this for anything you want if you prefer. I use this not for the skill attack and not for the melee attack. I mean, obviously those are nice. I use it for the occasionally nullify attacks when damage negation is lowered. Now, this gives you like a 1 in 5 chance to basically not take any damage at all. Not from status, not from anything, not even from an instant death attack. So it is an amazing relic, and it's probably the best relic you can get in the game. Now, the reason I use this, when you're in Depth 4 and Depth 5 and you're spamming your katana away, you're trying to proc whatever status you're using, you are going to take some damage somewhere along the line. Now, the Executor is not exactly a squishy character, but Depth 4 and Depth 5, you are not going to survive most attacks unless you have damage negation of full. So it just gives you a bit of a safety net. Now, it also works in conjunction with your character skill boost attack, but lowers damage negation. If you didn't know, when you are in your Suncatcher stance and you attack an enemy, your damage negation is lowered by 40%. So this just gives you a little bit of a safety net. Again, you could swap this out for whatever you want. I just like to use this. Second relic is obviously a god tier relic. We have the Night Invader with the character skill boost attack. Now, the HP restored, I don't really care for that. It just comes with the relic, can't change it. Shit happens, what do you do? Third relic is the attack power up with 3+ katanas. Now, obviously, Executor finds katanas as his default weapon class. So, when you have 3 katanas, you get a flat 20% damage boost, which is basically like having another Balancer's relic on, except you're not stuck to spamming your L2. And then the second line, the partial HP restoration, self-explanatory. When you take damage, when you hit them, you get some of the health back. Now, as for the deep relics, they're self-explanatory. Essentially, it's just physical attack up +4. You want to put the +4s on. You want to make them as strong as possible. Obviously, if you can fit them on. Obviously, try not to remove any of its dexterity, even though the dexterity that you're going to be losing, it'll be minuscule. You probably won't even notice it in the damage. And then at the very bottom, we have his dexterity and arcane relic. Now, using this relic, you do lose quite a bit of HP. I think it's about 140 HP that you lose. So I'm quite lucky that I have the increased HP on the relic at the very bottom. It kind of makes up for some of the HP that you lost. Although, even if I didn't have this on, I would still use this relic because it is quite a substantial damage increase. Your arcane is increased by like 9, and then your dexterity is increased by like 12, which gives him an 11% increase in stats build up and like a 7% increase in damage for katanas. Moving on, love him or hate him, my favourite Nightfarer in the whole entire series, we've got the Birdman, the Guardian. Now, I'm hearing so much slander about the Guardian all the time, how weak he is, how he doesn't do any damage, how he's useless in trios because he's constantly stuck in his guard, and even Yui thinks he's bottom tier and lower than the Scholar for a trio team, which honestly just breaks my heart to see. He may not be the top 5 Nightfarer, and he may not be able to do as much damage as many other characters, even though on paper, damage compared to damage, he's one of the hardest hitting characters. And of course, getting in and out of the still guard stance is an actual chore. The mechanic of the still guard and the way they've worked it is just terrible. I'm not saying I could do a better job, but they do need to rework it. It's never going to get reworked. That is just what we've got now, and you're going to just deal with it. But yeah, getting in and out of the still guard, you know, attacks going over your head and hitting you from behind, that stuff, it does really frustrate you when you play the Guardian. And I've got hundreds of hours into the Guardian. Right, bias aside, and if we're being honest with ourselves, he isn't one of the top Nightfarers, mostly because of his mechanics, his role, him being forced to play guard counters. The best guard counter ability he has, which is on a halberd, is stuck to a halberd, which halberds generally don't hit that hard. All that aside, I am going to give you a build that will keep you and your teammates alive in depth 5, and it will basically make you mostly indestructible. Now, as for the build, this is what we're running. So obviously, first relic is the Shockwave. That is a literal must-have for the Guardian. There's no point playing the Guardian with shields if you don't have that on the Steel Guard. Next one, we have taking attacks improves attack power. Essentially, when you take some damage, you'll get a 15% damage increase. Now, this will happen quite a lot in most boss fights that are using elemental damage. So your chip damage for the shield, every time you take some chip damage, you're going to get a constant 15% damage increase. And the final slot on that relic is the increased damage negation and poise when being knocked back. Essentially, when you get knocked back by one of the bigger boss attacks, you get a damage negation increase of 20%. It also increases poise damage incoming. That's nice to have, but the one we want there really is the damage negation. Next relic, we have the Guardian's Relic Vet. The slowly restores HP for your allies when you're using your ultimate ability. Honestly, in a trios, this is a must-have ability. And we also have the Night Invader Relic, which fits nicely because there's nothing else really that we want. Night Invader just to make him a little bit stronger. Finally, we have his Strength and Dex Relic. This is a must. If you want to do some damage, if you want to actually be a part of the team that is giving out damage to the enemies, this is a must relic to have. With this relic on, you get 50 Strength, 50 Dex, which is way more than basically every other character in the game. Obviously, the Raider still has more strength. I think the Raider has like 66 or something. But this relic gives you a 50-50 split, which means you will out-damage most characters with most weapons. For the deep relics, obviously this is going to be very RNG dependent. Now, my top relic is just a physical attack up +3, defeating enemies +1s, and then you get the Guardian's character skill, which boosts damage negation of nearby allies. This skill is really useful for your squishy teammates. Now, it just gives them a 12% damage negation increase for like 30 seconds, so it's just nice to have for your teammates. It's especially useful in the early game when you're running through the expedition. Next one is also a must. Now, obviously, again, it's RNG dependent, so if you can't fit this on, you know, it is what it is. What can you do? Partial HP restoration on post-damage attacks, +1. Obviously, the +2 would be better, but I've only got a +1. Next up, we got the Dormant Power helps discover Great Shield. I do think this is the single-handed best relic for the Guardian you can have, mostly because it's so annoying trying to find a decent shield. Then you've got to go to a mine to make it a +2, and if you're not with casters like Rev, who's using the Beast Claw, going to the mines is just a pain because you can get a purple weapon from most of the bosses you're fighting. So Dormant Power helps discover Great Shield is just a must-have for me, and then obviously at the very bottom there we've got some affinity damage negation, which is very nice. Now, the base version is only something like a 6% affinity damage negation increase, which is still nice to have. But on my bottom relic, we have a physical attack +4, which obviously boosts his damage by 12%. And then we've got a improved affinity damage negation +2, which is basically just another 12% damage negation on top of the already 6. So we've got basically 20% damage negation, affinity damage negation, which is really useful for preventing the affinity damage you're going to be taking from bigger attacks by the Night Lords. Now, the Guardian is very difficult to use throughout the expedition because you're always stuck between wanting to do more damage to help the team out or preventing any affinity damage from essentially killing you, because that's what will kill you if you're the Guardian. It'll be either missing an attack and it goes over your head and does a shitload of damage and then you're on the back foot, or you're fighting a boss that does a shit ton of elemental damage, you get stuck in a combo and you just get ripped to shreds through the shield. So, with the dormant power helps discover great shields, you'll be able to find a very good shield, and if you're fighting field bosses, you will get offered very good shields. We already have a flat 20%-ish affinity damage negation, so realistically, in the expeditions, you want to be finding taking damage, boost damage negation on charged attacks, especially if you've got like fists, because it'll just work wonders. And then you may want to use a damage negation at full just to prevent that first big attack from killing you, but honestly I don't think you really need it. And obviously, without saying, successful guards up damage negation. Those are a must for the Guardian. Final build for this part of the video, because I will make it a two-part video just for the sake of the length of the video, otherwise you motherfuckers with the low attention span won't watch it. Now, some of you obviously will watch it all the way through, and you are the absolute chads, and you are going to have a cold pillow tonight all night. But the final character we're going to talk about is the Undertaker. Now, there are a few different builds that you can actually run with the Undertaker, and they're all pretty much the same, just with different weapon classes. You've probably guessed it, it's a power stance something build. Now, my favourites are the straight sword, curved sword, and the great hammer builds, but obviously with the straight sword and the curved sword, you will need her dex relic, so the great hammer, in my personal opinion, is the best. It's either that or a fist build. But fist builds are boring, we've all done fist builds, we know how strong they are, so I'm going to take you through my great hammer build. Now, right off the bat, we have the glass necklace, which is still probably the Undertaker's strongest relic. Mostly because the activating ultimate art increases attack power. That gives you like an 18% damage boost for like 40 seconds when you use her ultimate ability. And that comes paired with the successive attacks boost attack power. Now, prior to the nerf, top tier you would get like 35%. After the nerf, the max you can get is like 9%. It's like a 5 for the first tier, 6.5 for the second, and then 9 for the third tier. That paired with the activating ultimate art increases attack power for like 18%. You're still getting a fairly decent attack power increase. Next up, for the next two relics, we basically just have the initial standard. Now, if you didn't know, just a standing L1 also works for the initial standard. So if you do like L1, R1, L1, R1, you get a constant initial standard boost attack. So we got two of those to just an extra 30%, 15% increase for both of those a pop. And in the middle relic, you can see we got the stamina recovery upon landing attacks. Now, power stance movesets take a lot of stamina. The reason why they work so well on the Undertaker is her character skill, the trance, essentially refills her stamina bar. So you can spam your L1, R1 mix-ups to your heart's content, and then you can hit the character skill, enter the trance state, and your stamina refills so you can get out of danger, or you just keep spamming, whatever you want to do. But that's why it works so well with the Undertaker. For the Deep of Night relics, the top one is obviously just another initial standard. The Executing Art readies character skill. It's not really a must, I've just got it in conjunction with initial standard. But essentially, when you hit them with your ultimate ability, it readies your character skill again, so you can start spamming your L1. The middle relic, I only really have that on there for the dormant powers discovers great hammers, because obviously it's a great hammer build. We want great hammers. She would find hammers normally, which hammers aren't very good in my opinion. And in conjunction with that, we also have the partial HP restoration upon post damage attacks +2. I think you get like a 35% of your damage back when you've taken a hit. So it just works really well with power stance moves because you get 2 hits, which means you get more health back. And then the bottom relic, we just got a physical attack up +4, some affinity damage negation, and then a +1 of the partial HP restoration. So we're getting as much HP back as possible when we're taking damage, and then we can just spam our L1 for our initial standard Great Hammer build. So gamers, we're going to end it there because the video is going to be like 20 minutes long otherwise, and you're not going to watch it, which means it's not going to get pushed out in the algorithm, and I'm going to be a failure. And of course, we don't want that. Right, the next part is going to be covering every Nightfarer that I haven't covered, so Raider, Walder, Recluse, Duchess, and the Revenant. So gamers, if you're interested in seeing part 2, hit the sub button, help a brother out, if you're not already subbed, that is, obviously, because, you know, big number, big sub, me man, me happy. Let me know your thoughts on the builds that I've given so far. These are generally the builds I've used in Depth 3, Depth 4, and Depth 5. I don't really change. Unless I'm actually trying to create a new build, these will be the builds that I'm running. For those of you who have played with me, you will see these are the builds that I'm running. So let me know your thoughts on these so far. Gamers, as always, stay safe. Catch you on the next one. Big love. Peace.